Okay. Okay, Mark, say something.
Something. We're testing the sound.
Okay, they should be
here.
Okay. Yes, now. All right, so let me just check the levels here a little bit. Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. All right, hello. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, you guys should be able to hear this now. And yay, technical difficulties. Angela, you nailed it. Yeah, so.
The sound is still weird because there's an echo coming through now.
Okay, I'm not sure why. I'm sure the echo has something to do with me using the Google Hangouts and the headphones that I'm using.
Yeah, so the sound is still weird.
Mark, can you mute? Do you have the audio playing on the stream that you're listening to?
Oh, hold on.
Okay, I'm not sure why.
Okay, I got it figured. For
okay, that
whatever
should take care of the sound.
We started playing.
Okay, so the chat's moving pretty fast. I've got it up so I can see. Oh, Naraya, hey, you've got your own account now. That's awesome. Sandy's here, Bill is here, Rob is here, and the other Sandy Gedry and Sandy Sousa. RJ, hey. I didn't, yeah. You didn't miss anything. Of course, we had to start with some technical difficulties. Tonight is all about lighting. Now, we've already got some questions that came in earlier today when I posted out on Facebook and Twitter, and we are taking questions in the chat. Mark is, of course, here with us. So I can see the chat, but Mark is also going to be watching the chat and making sure that we pull out your questions so that we don't miss anything, because it's going to, I can only see so much of the chat on this great big monitor I have here, but it's awesome. If you guys can't see it, you should be able to see it in this angle, the small angle off to the side. This is my chat monitor, so I can see what you guys are saying to us when we're going here.
Oh, Naraya says it's her father's birthday today.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's awesome, yep.
Yeah, hello, Tom. Is your dad is Christopher with us yet? Either way, happy birthday, Christopher. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Happy birthday for sure.
Yeah. Oh, Rajesh is here, and I think I saw Shaz as well. Okay, so the first question I wanted to tackle before we even start anything, because this is like the foundation of it all, right? Mark, you saw the question from Lord Bacchus, right?
Did I?
Yeah, you should have. I think it's in the chat. I mean, I think it's in the, yeah, it's the Bacchus Giacomo, I can't say his last name. I'm going to read it off. You ready for it? No, it's in the blab. So Bacchus had a question. I'm just going to grab this so I can come over here. His question, this is what I wanted to start with. Yeah, Jim, I do need a bigger screen. Hey, Candy, how's it going? John is here and Danny is here. Fabulous. Bacchus's question is, he says, I have never owned a flash/speed light. He says, every time it goes off, it ruins my photos. Ruins is in capital letters. And he says, convince me I need it. Says, why spend money on something I do not have control over? Okay. Mark, you want to take that to start?
Sure. You need it so you can learn how to control the monster.
That's exactly it.
That's the primary thing. And if you don't have one, you'll never learn how to use it. And it's just like anything else. It's practice, and you'll eventually get the hang of it. And like we've all had that struggle when we first started off with Flash. But once you actually get the basics, once you get the basics down, then you build from there, and it just opens up so many more windows. Like over the past, let's say past couple of months, a good example here is in the chat. She's just recently started using Flash a lot more often, and it is, her work has always been good in my opinion. But as soon as she started using Flash, I could just see how much more advanced and better looking her photos were. There was a point where I started seeing her pictures, and all of a sudden they were like 10 times better than they were before. And I knew she did something different, and that's what it was. Is she started using flash.
Yep. That you're absolutely right.
And she should be quite proud of what she's accomplished, because some of the stuff that she's been pumping out is quite good.
I agree. I've been seeing that, and it's really good. So I want to address Bacchus a little bit more directly, because when he says, I've never bought a flash, the only flash then that he's ever used has been the pop-up flash on the camera. Now, I don't actually have, my camera doesn't have a pop-up flash. It actually comes with a teeny tiny little flash that is similar to a pop-up. But here's the deal, right? When you have a pop-up flash on your camera like this, you basically can't control it, because it's pretty much a dummy flash, and it really only serves one purpose, which is to pound light into a scene and make it bright enough for you to get a fast shutter speed, right? Like, that's really the only purpose that an on-camera pop-up flash serves. And of course that flash is going to make your pictures look horrible. It's like taking a fire hose and just pounding water right into somebody's face. That's not really very useful or helpful. So those are going to look like crap. But if you want to be convinced that you should buy flash, just take a look at the photograph that you should be able to see on screen next to Mark in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, okay? That photo was possible because of flash photography. Those lights were lights that I controlled and I positioned and I gelled to change the colors and to shape the shape and to light the light where I wanted the light and to put the shadow where I wanted the shadow and to make what I think is a pretty amazing photo. So flash is all about control, just like Mark said, right? So let's start with, I saw Christian had a question in the chat. Did you grab that one, Mark?
Yes, I did.
Okay, awesome. And then we've got another one from Lovable Singcan. All right, so why don't you just start firing questions at me, Mark, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. We'll start with sort of it's a dual question from Tim and followed up by Barbara. So Tim basically starts off saying flash/lighting is an I don't know what to do area for me. I'm so excited to learn, but I'm not even sure what to ask. Then Barbara comes up saying, I'm with Tim. As a matter of fact, I asked for help from another Facebook site just for lighting. Back in December, the moderator just wrote me like an hour ago telling me I messaged his wrong site and to ask again on his new site. Oh, okay. Anyways, I had the young Newell flash system that I bought for a wedding I shot back in December, which I never used. I would like to learn how to use it. I'm not portrait or wedding or anything, but just in generally how to use it.
Okay, so basically what we're talking about then is the foundation of lighting, right? Like, let's just go over some lighting basics. Before I jump into that, I want to address what RJ said in the chat, which is true. He says pop-up flash is limiting, but on-camera flash can be made cool even when being used straight on. And this is true, very, very true. But the key there, again, is control. There's two things you need to know in flash photography. Number one is how to make the flash do what you want it to do. Number two is knowing what you want the flash to do. And that's one of the big differences. When you get into flash photography, you have to think differently about your photographs, because now you're thinking about and what you want to do with the lighting, right? If you've never used flash, or even if you're just starting to use flash, you have been used to shooting where you walk into a situation and you see the light and you take photos with that light. You use the light that you've been given. And when you do that, you still see the light and you still think about the light, but you don't really think about how to change that light, because you can't, right? Like, you can't go outside and say, oh, the sun's too bright, I'm going to turn it down a little bit, right? You just can't do that. So let's start with some basics. All right, let's see. How much power and how far away from the people? Thomas, you're going to need to clarify that, please. I was shooting indoors with a flash. I got some good pictures last night, but is there a rule set like your triangle rule that we should keep in mind? That's a good question. All right, let's start with the basics. Let's get going with the basics, okay? And the basics of flash are, first of all, you have to consider two light sources now, right? You've got your continuous light, which is this stuff right here. You know, you've got your ceiling light, your sun. Yeah, RJ, off camera for life, for sure. Lights in your room, whatever the case may be. That's what you would call continuous light. It's running all of the time. A flash is an instantaneous light source. And what that means is when you fire your photo, your flash goes off. Did that go off?
Didn't see it.
For a very, very, very brief moment. It's a super fast flash, right? So what you have is continuous light that's going all the time, instantaneous light that is on for a very brief moment and gone again. And you can control these light sources independent of each other. That's the very first thing that you want to know about flash photography. And if you want to have that control, what you want to do is be shooting in manual mode, because that's going to give you the most control over your lighting in both situations, in your ambient and your flash. All right, so I need to hook up my camera to the computer so you guys can see what we're doing. And we're going to start with my model / subject there hanging by the wall. That's my mannequin girl, Lisa. Whoops, I just hit the wrong button.
Yeah, when I was first trying to figure out flash, I always found, and even still, I find it's a lot easier to do flash in studio where you don't have much ambient light, and basically you're only dealing with the flash. But even now, sometimes outdoors when I'm trying to balance nicely the ambient light with the flash, I sometimes struggle with that. But for the most part, that mainly because speed lights have a little bit more trouble overpowering the sun. So that's the primary reason I sometimes have issues shooting outdoors and getting things to balance right, just because you're trying to make the flash work and you can't make it work. So it can definitely be frustrating when you're dealing with something like that.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got mannequin Lisa, our subject, in the ambient light. And I'm just going to take a picture of her using the ambient light in the scene. I'm in manual mode, and I'm going to set my settings, my ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, so that I get a 0 reading on my exposure indicator. And when I do that, let's see where we're at here. I definitely got to lower my shutter speed. We'll take it down to 1/50th. I got to open my aperture up almost all the way. In fact, all the way. And I'm going to have to increase my ISO a little bit as well. And I'm at 1/50th of a second with f2.8 and an ISO of 500. And when I take this photo, whoops, I forgot I had my self-timer turned on because I was taking a self-portrait earlier today. Let me reset this and turn off my self-timer. Come on. There we go, back there. And this is what the photo looks like. And you can see it there on the screen. It's not super flattering. It's really not very good at all. You know, it's yellow because I didn't change my white balance. If I change my white balance, it'll be a little bit better, but it's just not a very exciting photo. It's really the bottom line. Because it's just a photo of her, the model, in this ambient light, right? And if you look at the shot, right, you can see that there's light right here on the top of her head because those lights from above. You can see it hitting the top of her nose, the top of her cheekbones, the top of her shoulders. You can see it's casting shadows underneath her chin and underneath her nose and underneath her eyes, right? And it's an okay shot, right? Like, it's not that it's a bad shot, but it's not a great shot.
It's not an award-winning shot.
It's definitely not an award-winning shot, right? So now let's add in the flash. And if we just add in the flash and we put it on the camera and we don't do anything else, we just put it on there and turn it on and fire, this is going to be ugly. I guarantee you this is going to be ugly. Woo, yeah, that's bad.
Yeah.
It's super bright, right? Okay, so why is it super bright? And this flash isn't even at full power. It's at like 1/16th power. So the reason that photo looks the way it does is because my ISO is at 500, my aperture is at f2.8. That's really wide aperture with a fairly high ISO sensitivity. Now, I didn't mention anything about my shutter speed because the shutter speed actually doesn't make any difference to the flash because the flash happens so quickly that the shutter speed doesn't even matter. I was shooting at 1/50th of a second, but that flash was on for probably something in the neighborhood of 1/5000th of a second. We got any comments on any of this stuff, Mark?
Not specifically what you're doing, but there are some comments, just some general questions.
Okay, let me get through the rest of this bit here, just laying this foundation, and then we'll get into your questions. So let's say I want to use just the flash. Actually, first let's adjust the flash. I'm going to just turn the power way down and see if that makes it any better. It should be not quite so awful. It's still basically the same photo as before. You can see it's a little brighter on her face. There's a little bit.
The eye sockets aren't as dark.
What's that?
The eye sockets aren't as dark.
Right, the eye sockets aren't as dark. There's a little bit more of a harsh shadow underneath her chin in the photo because the light from the flash hit her chin and cast a hard-edged shadow right down underneath here. But like her face area, I feel like I'm rubbing her up in a bad way, is all filled in compared to that previous shot because of this flash on the camera. Okay, but now, if we go back to that original shot where we take the flash off, it's just, we got all this other stuff going on in the background, and we've got the top light, and all this stuff. I want to get rid of this light now, right? I don't want this in my shot. Do you always keep the lights above on, Candy? That's a great question because that's about exactly what I'm about to talk to. If you're using flash, but you don't want your ambient light in the shot, your instinct would be, I need to turn off my lights, right? But you actually don't have to do that because you can use your settings, your camera settings, to eliminate this ambient light, but still have flash in the shot. And let me show you what I mean. I'm going to set my settings so that the room is basically dark in the photo. I'm going to take my ISO back down to my base, which is 200. And I'm going to set my shutter speed to 1/250th of a second, and I'll explain why in a moment. And I'm going to set my aperture to f7.1, and I'm going to take this picture, and it should be black.
Yep, pretty much.
Yep, you guys see that? Okay, there's no light coming into the photo from these overhead lights now because I set my camera settings to eliminate that. Now I'm going to put this flash, and I'm going to take a photo with it, and it will light her up. Now that's an ugly photo, okay? Let's not pretend that this is a good photo. And this is what Bacchus was talking about, right? Like that photo, it lit her up, but it is ugly, right? It is ugly. So I'm just going to do one simple thing. I'm going to point my flash at the ceiling. We're going to make a little change.
It's dark.
It's very, very dark. So what I need to do here is increase the power of my flash. So I'm going to increase the power quite a bit. Still pretty dark, isn't it?
Yeah. Open your aperture.
I might. Let me change the angle of bounce. There we go.
There we go. That's it.
Now, that looks very similar to what I shot before because what I did was I aimed the light at the ceiling. It bounced off of the ceiling and came down on her just like these lights were doing anyway. That's kind of the limitation of on-camera flash. But what I want to quickly talk about here.
Better because you notice the shadow under her chin isn't as harsh.
Yes, because of the diffusion of that light. So
yes.
What I want to show you guys here is that you can eliminate this light and only work with the flash as your source of light for the photo. And that's important because that's what allows you to do things like what I showed you at the beginning, that picture of the lady with the green and the orange light and a really cool shaping and shadows and light on her. All right, let's get some questions here.
Okay, I'll start with some of the ones that are here in the chat. Let's see. Christian asks if you have a speed light indoors. Oh no, sorry. He was just talking about what you just did there with the softbox.
Okay.
Thomas had asked earlier about how much power, and he clarified what he was asking. Scrolled on me and I lost it. Hold on.
Okay. All right, while you're doing that, Candy had a question that just came in, so I'm going to answer that while you're looking for that. Okay, so Candy was asking how you turn up the power on the flash. This varies by flash type, but I'm going to show you on this particular flash, and I'm going to grab another one and show you how. This is a very, very simple manual flash, and you can see here this little blue light. That indicates full power on the flash, and then next to it are a bunch of different lines. This changes in one-stop increments, and that means that if I change the light from full power down to half power by using this minus button, that light is now bright as it was at full power. And then if I go again, that's quarter power, 1/8 power, 1/16, 1/32, 1/64, and finally 1/128 power. So on this light, all I need to do to change the power is press these plus and minus buttons, and it'll go up and down. But other flashes are different. Let me grab you a different flash so you guys can see. It's got batteries in it. That's good. Okay, this is a young Nuo. It's got batteries. There we go. This is a young Nuo flash, and this has a little dial that you just spin to change the power. And what's nice about this flash is you can change things in 1/3 stop increments. So rather than just going from 1/4 power to 1/2 power like I did in my other flash, I can go to 1/4 power plus 1/3 of a stop or plus 2/3 of a stop, and so on and so forth. And this one goes from full power down to 1/128 power as well. That's a pretty common power set on speed lights. But Christian had a question earlier, which was, if you have a strobe, like a studio strobe, like this, let me grab it off the wall. This is a studio strobe, which connects to a great big power pack like this. This supplies 4,000 watts of power to the flash, okay? This runs on 4 AA batteries. There's no way that this flash is going to be as powerful at 1/128 power as this flash with this giant power pack, also set at 1/128 power. Yeah. So when we're talking about power settings on a flash, it's always relative to the power of that flash. It's not an absolute. Every flash at 128 power is not the same.
Yeah, even my young Nuo 560 versus your 660 at 1/128 will be different.
Right, but two of the same flash will be the same at 1/128 power. Okay, so like two of this flash will be the exact same brightness at 1/128 power because they have the same output and the same power level because they're the same flash. All right. Sandy asks, can you use a speed light for macro or do you need a ring flash? You can definitely use a speed light for macro. You just got to get them in there really, really, really close. And it can be difficult to do, which is why ring flashes tend to be preferred for macro photography. But it is possible to work with speed lights, especially if you have a big diffusion panel, a big softbox or something. And when I say big, it doesn't have to be enormous. Like this is an 18-inch softbox that I made that I've used for macro photography. But by getting it very close to the subject, this is a great big light source, which will put light all over the subject. So speed lights definitely can be used, but you might have to finagle the position a little bit more than just using a ring light.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got, Mark?
Okay, Thomas had a question. The first one he asked was basically, we asked him to clarify. He asked how much power and how far away from the people. And then basically he clarified and he said, sorry, for a headshot, how much power and how far away from the person. And so in a case like that, it's difficult to really say what the best settings are because it's going to depend on the conditions. There's no magical settings that are specifically going to work, especially with using flash.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact,
because if you're indoors, it's going to be different than if you're outdoors, and if you're outdoors in the shade versus open sunlight and etc. and so on. Basically, once you start using the flash, you get an idea as to how much power your specific flash can do, and what you can do with it, and what you can't do with it, and you'll typically, for the most part, you'll be able to walk up to your subject with your base settings, and within a couple of shots, get your settings set the way you need them, because you'll at that, once you get familiar with it, then it's easier to know what's going to work and not going to work. It's just not really any different than your other camera settings. Just play with them and just practice and practice and practice till it almost becomes second nature.
Right. Now, all of that being said, because it is 100% right, it depends on what you want out of the shot. It depends on what you're trying to do. But let's say you're just trying to take a basic headshot and you just want basic light, basic even lighting, right? I can show you that. So what I'm doing is I'm setting my camera up, or my flash up, and I'm using, let me show it to you guys. This is a Pocket Wizard +3 trigger. It's actually called a transceiver because it can be a transmitter and a receiver, but I'm using it in receiver mode attached to my flash. And this is what RJ referred to earlier when he did the hashtag off camera for life, because I'm going to be using the flash off of the camera. It is going to fire by receiving a signal from a Pocket Wizard attached to my camera. Now I've got the flash turned on, and I'm going to start with that at full power. And before you ever even take a photo with the flash turned on, and I've got it turned off right now, what you want to do is decide what you're going to do with your ambient light. Most of the time, I recommend you kill the ambient light. And by kill it, I mean you set your settings like I set them earlier, so that the ambient light is underexposed by something like -3 stops. And I did that by setting my shutter speed to 1/250th of a second, my aperture to f7.1, and my ISO to 200, which is my lowest possible ISO. And again, if I take a photo, which I'm going to do right now, you're going to see that it's black. That's the way it's supposed to be. When I do that, I know now that all of the light in my photo is going to come from just this flash, which means I have total control over how the photo is going to look. If we want a nice basic headshot, we probably want soft light. So I'm going to grab an umbrella. Now, what is soft light and what is hard light? Mark, you want to explain that while I'm setting this up?
Yeah, sure. A hard light will basically give you where you see the shadows. Hard light will basically be very, very sharp edge to the shadow. Soft light will basically, it'll be very, well, depending on how soft it is. The softer it is, the more gradual it will be, and blend the brights will blend into the darks. And something like a beauty dish will be sort of somewhere in between, and soft boxes will be different, and a lot of it depends on the size of your modifier and the distance from the subject will determine a lot as to how soft or hard light it is, because you can have a soft box, but if the soft box is really far away, it's still going to be hard light, because the further away it is, the smaller the light source is in the subject.
Exactly. So hard light and soft light is the difference in the size of the light. And when you have a speed light like this, it's very tiny. And that tiny light gives you that hard light that Mark was talking about, which results in hard-edged shadows that are very deep and black. And I've got the flash turned on, and I'm going to start with it at full power. And one of the questions earlier was, how do you know what power to choose? Oh, by the way, I wanted to answer this question quick. TC is wondering where he can find a model like this. I bought this off of Amazon. I got it for about $60. I think they're more expensive now. And I just did a search for mannequin. So take a look on Amazon, and you'll be able to find one fairly easily. Okay, one of the things I forgot to mention earlier too is why I'm using 1/250th of a second. That's called the sync speed. And Victor had a question earlier that we're going to address, which is explaining high-speed sync photography. But your sync speed is a physical limitation of your flash, of your camera, I mean. And it is the fastest shutter speed that you can use with a flash and still get a photo that doesn't take a picture of the internals of your camera. And I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm going to actually set my shutter speed to 1/500th of a second, and I'm going to take a picture. And when I do this, you should see nothing because I didn't put the flash on the trigger on the camera until we're done.
That'll do it every time.
So when you do that, yep.
You really crushed the ambient light there, at least.
I did crush the ambient light. Yeah, I got that much going for me at least. Okay, this is the transceiver. This is the trigger I was talking about. This is going to cause the flash to fire because it's going to send a radio signal to this. And these are dumb triggers, meaning it just sends a signal that says fire. That's it. It doesn't send any other information. But when I take this photo, you're going to see a bar across the photo. And that bar is me taking a photograph of the shutter inside of my camera. Because how your camera actually works on the internals is you have that shutter that's in front of your camera sensor. And when you take a photo, what happens is that shutter opens and then another shutter behind it closes. The sync speed is the fastest shutter speed you can use, where the first shutter opens up all the way before the second shutter starts to close behind it. Any speed after that you use, what happens is the first shutter starts to open, and before it's up all the way, the second one starts following it behind, and it essentially just runs a little slit over your image sensor so that everything is properly and evenly closed. So when you use a shutter speed that's above your sync speed, you're taking a picture of your camera shutter is in the way when the flash fires. So when I set my sync speed, go ahead.
I was going to say, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Hiram had a question that says, not really a question, but sort of a statement. He says, so manual mode is the best way to control your flash, then TTL. So when you talked about the camera just sending just a quick little signal and poofing the flash, and that was it, that kind of made me think of that. So
yeah, so that's a good point. So the TTL is a way to TTL is kind of another animal because TTL is basically auto mode for your flash.
Yeah, the camera controlling your flash.
Exactly, the camera controlling your flash and the amount of power that your flash outputs. And I personally don't, I never use TTL. In fact, right now with my current setup, I can't use TTL because none of my flashes are TTL compatible with my camera. And the only time I used to use TTL was the very rare occasion when I was working an event like, you know, as an example, I had to photograph a ballroom dance for a magazine, a local magazine. This was years ago. And at that time, I had a Canon camera with a Canon flash that was TTL capable. And where that's helpful is when you're doing photography like that, where you got to run around and you're moving a lot and the situation is changing a lot and you don't have time to mess around with the flash power settings yourself. Because what TTL flash does in manual mode is assumes that the flash is going to be the fill light or the main light for the subject. And it doesn't try to expose for the whole scene. It just tries to expose for the subject. And so TTL is great for what's typically called run and gun photography. It's okay for studio photography, but I don't like it for studio photography because when you set a flash in a spot like this, or maybe in a spot like this, because you want to do like a rim light along the subject's edge, then the flash and the camera get goofed up because to the camera, this isn't the right place for the flash to be for it to do its calculations and make its automatic settings. And so I don't think TTL is great for doing studio work. But that's my opinion. RJ says it's worth mentioning sync speed and studio strobes. The shutter speed needs to be lower in most cases when compared to speed lights. That's a good point, RJ, and thank you for bringing that up. I do know that with my Normans and the studio strobes that I showed you guys, I can actually sync at the exact same speed of 2/50th. But you're right. Some studio strobes require you to use a longer shutter speed because the duration of the flash is actually a bit longer. And it's a bit longer because it's so darn powerful. TC says, he asks, are you saying that I have to buy a non-TTL speed light? And the answer to that is no. In fact, having at least one speed light that is TTL capable is worthwhile, because if you find yourself in one of those run and gun situations, you might want to use TTL. But every TTL flash can be switched into manual mode where you fully control the flash and the power output.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Yep, all you got to do is hit that mode button until you see a big M on the back of the flash. Then you're in manual mode and you're in full control.
Yeah, but that being said, too, is typically a manual flash is going to be cheaper than a TTL flash, too.
Yes, exactly. It's very, very true. So back to the photo, that's really, really hard light. And in addition to being really hard light, it's also really bright. If you look at the right side of Lisa's face, it's pretty much entirely burned out, right? Like it's overexposed. You can see her eye, but everything else is just gone. And that means that my flash has too much power. And back to that question, how do you know how much power? Time with using your flashes. Because after working with lighting for a while, you get to know, like in a situation like this, if I'm taking a photograph of a model and my light is bare, I knew full power was going to be way too bright for this. And I would set my power to around like 1/16 to 1/32 to put a decent amount of light on the subject without overexposing. So that's what I did. I just turned the power down, and I'm going to take another shot. And with this one, the light's still going to be hard edged, but it is much dimmer, as you can see. And now she's got detail on the right side of her face, but you can see that the whole left side of her face basically falls into shadow. That's not really great for a headshot, is it? And that's why, if you want to do like a standard sort of headshot, you want an umbrella or something similar to an umbrella, so you can diffuse the light like Mark was talking about earlier. Yeah. And Sandy made a comment about how she had something backwards, which was she thought the bigger the light was, the harsher it was. But that's actually just the opposite, because the bigger the light is, the bigger the light source is, the more light gets around the subject. See, what's happening with, let me take this off for a minute. What's happening with this light is you basically, it's not exactly, but you sort of have like a little tunnel of light that comes out and hits the model here, and that's about it, right? Because it's this tight little beam. Now, the light does spread out as it travels, but because this is a pretty short distance, it mostly hits just this side of Lisa, leaving this side of her face completely black, which is what you see in the shot. When I put this on, now it's like, let me get it tied on there. Now the light is this big, which means light can come and hit this side of her face. It can hit this side of her face. It's going to get all over the place. But, when I take the exact same photo, it's going to be too dark. And the reason, Mark, you want to explain why it's going to be too dark?
Sure. Yeah, the reason it's going to be too dark is that as soon as you start using light modifiers, whether it's a shoot-through umbrella or reflective umbrella, softbox or anything like that, it's taking power away from the flash because it has all that diffusion that has to go through. So it's blocking some of the light. So basically, there's no general rule. Like you can't say with an umbrella you're going to need to bump it up an extra stop, there's no general rule where you can just say just increase the stop and it'll work, because it's going to depend on the modifier that you're using.
Right. Now, a manual class says you could use a light meter. I don't use an external light meter. I use the camera's light meter, basically, is what I do, which means I take a photo and I look at it. And like with this one, I say two things. Number one, the light's still pretty dark on the left side of her face. And that's because the light's actually shooting past her like this. I need to change how it's aimed. Right? If I just bring it like this, it's now pointing more directly at her face. And it is definitely going to get more light over on this side. It's still going to be too dark, but I just want to show you the change in moving it.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, just to comment on the light meter. Myself, I do use a light meter. The advantage of a light meter versus not using a light meter is a light meter, you can take it and you get your exposure the first time versus having to play with your settings and try and get something that works. So that is one advantage. But with experience, of course, with anything else, you can learn how to get to your exposure without using the light meter. And then the light meter is very handy if you're using more than one light too, because then you can set up ratios between your two different lights. So that's definitely been a handy thing with it too. So if you're using multiple lights and you want the light on one side at twice the power as the one on the other side, then it's a little easier for fine tuning.
Very, very true. Now, if you look at the photo I just shot, you can see there's definitely more light on the left side of her face, but as we said, it's too dark. So what I'm going to do now is just turn up the power, and this is arbitrary on my part, but looking at the shot and knowing what I know, I'm going to go up 2 stops. And this is probably going to be pretty close.
Yep. And again, based on experience, because you've been doing it forever.
Yep. And there we go. Like, that actually is quite nice. Now, my background is really ugly, right? So let's just drop this to black that out, and we'll take one more shot, and this is going to look really nice.
Yeah. Jim asks if there's a difference between shooting through the umbrella or bouncing it from the inside. And,
that's a really good question.
Yeah. But with that, like with the umbrella Spyros is using right now, that is a shoot-through umbrella. That's not a bouncing umbrella, but there are other umbrellas. I'm not sure if you have one handy or not. That's black on the outside, and
I sort of do.
Yeah, I have one within arm's reach.
Yeah, why don't you grab yours, because mine's not really a shoot-through. Go ahead and grab it, and I'll finish explaining. So the only real difference is if you have if it's a bounce umbrella, the only real difference is going to be, as you see with Mark's, the interior of the umbrella is silver to create that nice bouncy reflection. That's going to make the light like a little teeny tiny bit more edgy. And like, it's not, harder isn't the right word. Specular is actually kind of the right word for it. It's still going to diffuse your light because it's taking a small light and making it into a big source. But because it's bouncing off of a silver surface. Go ahead, Mark.
And some of these reflective umbrellas are white, not silver on the inside too, so it is softer. But having the black on the back, it's not a shoot through. But a lot of them, this one I don't think is. A lot of them are what they call convertible, where you can take this off and then use it as a shoot through umbrella as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we had a couple of questions. First of all, RJ is right. Nobody's going to laugh. There's no stupid question. If you have a question, please feel free to ask it. Sandy, I saw it just scroll by. She wanted to know what a softbox is. A softbox, this is a softbox that I made, and this is what a softbox typically looks like when it is assembled. And I'll explain the purpose of a softbox versus using something like an umbrella. What's frustrating about softboxes is they are stupid expensive. And they don't really need to be stupid expensive. Because, honest to God, the materials that go into making a softbox are not that expensive. So I'm fairly frustrated at how expensive softboxes are, because I think that some of these companies are legitimately gouging photographers. So a softbox.
But we won't mention any names.
No. A softbox gives you a diffusion surface, but it also gives you a container. And that container contains the light that is spilling around all over the place. Because again, let me pull that backdrop back up. I'll show you what a softbox does for you. When we have the backdrop up and we shoot the model, there's light that spills around and bounces all over the place and hits that background. So you can see my wall, you can see the table, you can see this bit of backdrop hanging down behind her. You can see all this garbage back here. And it's ugly. And we don't want to see that. So if we take off this umbrella and we put a softbox on there, much more of that light is going to be contained. Not all of it. Some of it's still going to get to the background, but a lot of it is going to be contained. And I got to change how this is aimed a little bit because my softbox groups. Okay, now you can still see all of that light hitting the background, right? But watch what happens when I do this. I'm going to bring this super close, and I'm going to turn it to the side. And I'm going to have to turn it down because it's close to her, but I'm going to leave it where it was for the first shot so you guys can see the difference. I'm bringing this closer and changing the angle for two reasons. Number one, by bringing it closer, it makes the diffusion around her face greater. Next, I've now aimed the light this way, which means that there should be very little to no light on our background now. So let me shoot that. I'm going to have to get real close. I'm actually going to shoot it vertically. It's a little too close for me to get the shot, so I'm going to move it back a hair. Okay, now there's still...
Too bright.
Yeah, it's definitely too bright, and there's still light on the background. But I'm going to put the umbrella back in and show you how much more light goes on the background with the umbrella.
Yeah, but basically with a shoot-through umbrella like that, light goes everywhere. There's absolutely the next to no control with it. With a reflective umbrella, you get a little bit more control, and a softbox, you get even more control.
Right. Now, I'm going to show you how you can eliminate that background light entirely. I'm too close there. We've got some good questions. I want to finish this real quick, and I know we're getting close to 7 already, so we've got a bunch of questions that we got to answer. So I'm bringing her farther away from the background. And by doing that, I'm going to use the diminishing power of light to make this black behind her, even though I don't have a black backdrop. Something called the inverse square law, which sounds intimidating and scary, but it actually isn't. It just means that as light travels further away from the source, it loses power, which means by the time we get to the back here, it's not going to be powerful enough to come into the shot. Manual classes may be adding a grid to the softbox. That is something that could help you with that, but I don't actually have a grid, so I can't put a grid on this softbox.
I don't own a grid.
All right,
either.
what do we got for questions, Mark?
As a new photographer, we indulge in lots of expensive equipment that we must have, like your box there. Is there an umbrella setup that is for those on a budget? And that's a good question. Umbrellas are actually very cheap. You can get cheap ones on eBay for like $15-20. You can get ones that are a little bit more half decent for like $50. And you can get cheap light stands as well too on eBay. I haven't seen them price them in a while, but probably anywhere from $15 and upward, depending on how bad of a quality one you get. So for just starting out, I think cheap light stand and a couple of umbrellas is the way to go.
Yeah, in fact, like if you want to get started with flash photography, there's a video that I've done that shows you exactly what you need to get started, and it can cost you under $100. All you need is an umbrella like this. This umbrella that I use, this costs $24. It's quite reasonably priced, and it's a nice umbrella. You need a light stand like this, and you can get light stands for $10 to $20. You need a bracket like this, which holds the flash and your umbrella. And that bracket will cost you anywhere between $10 and $20, depending upon how good a bracket you want. You need a flash, and this exact flash right here, it's a $35 flash. It's a great flash. Simple, manual only is $35, super cheap. And then you need a set of triggers. Don't buy Pocket Wizards because they're stupid expensive. Instead, buy the Yongnuo triggers. They're much more reasonable, and they're quite good. And all of that will cost you less than $100, depending upon what you piece together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's hit some of these questions rapid fire as fast as we can. This went super fast. I cannot believe how fast this hour went, Mark.
Yeah. No kidding.
All right. So fire them away at me.
Okay. Well, we got another question in the chat from Philip. He says, "I see some wedding photographers using shoot-through umbrellas with bouncing light towards the ceiling, while some light comes back to the bride and groom. And just wondering what our comment is on that. And myself, I think if they're pointing the umbrella at the ceiling, it's sort of almost a bit of a waste, because in a case like that, the umbrella is sucking up power, whereas the bouncing the light off the ceiling is going to give you a pretty nice soft light anyways. Like, the only advantage I can really think of maybe is the fact that the umbrella is going to throw some light out to the side as well too. But I think personally, if I was doing it, I'd rather bounce the bare light off the ceiling.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, because you're losing power by making the softbox a big source, and then that light hits the ceiling and bounces it around even further, which softens it more. My feeling is that the photographer was doing that to try to just throw light around the entirety of the room.
Yeah.
And without seeing that photographer's photos, I can't say how effective it was or wasn't. And if it works, it works. But that's definitely not an approach I would take. If I was going to try to fill a room with light, I would actually go to the four corners and set up a light in each corner, put it up as high as I could, and aim it generally down into the room. And depending on whether or not I had the ability, I'd maybe throw an umbrella on it. But I've shot exactly one wedding. And in that wedding, I did basically that, but I used bare speed lights. And it gives you a particular look, which is actually kind of a cool look for wedding photos. So I quite enjoyed the look I got from just four-cornering the room and putting speed lights up there at full power, because they were so far away around the room, and letting them fly around.
Yeah.
It fills the room up nicely.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways you can approach it. I've done it just shooting with the ambient light. I've done it bouncing off a ceiling like we talked about earlier. And I've also done it where basically there's a long, narrow hall, and I basically took two speed lights, sort of one at each end with umbrellas on them, sort of coming in and filling side. The biggest issue with doing it that way is that if the people you're shooting are a little bit further away from the flash, like closer to the wall, then you either have to adjust your ISO or your aperture to suck in that extra light because of the distance it's traveling.
Right. Scott says, lighting tutorial part 2 next week. We could do this again next week. Judy says, I have an infrared slave flash I want to use off the camera. Can I just buy an infrared trigger? Do I have to buy a radio transmitter and receiver? If it's an infrared slave flash, do you mean an optical flash, or do you mean it's actually infrared as in it works like, as an example, Canon's previous triggering system before the new flashes that they use worked through infrared, not actually infrared light transmission, but light transmission from the flash on the camera to the flash itself. Because those are two different sorts of questions. If you're just talking about an optical trigger flash, which is actually what this has, let me show you guys what happens here. I'm going to pull this flash off of here. I just blinded myself. And this flash here is in what's called S1 mode, which is slave 1 mode, which activates the little optical trigger that's underneath this little red panel here. That trigger just is dumb. And what it does is if another light flashes, it makes this light flash. So I'm going to hit the test button to fire this flash, and this one is also going to go off. And it's going off purely because the light from this hits this here and makes it go off. So here we go. It's that simple. So if it's that kind of a flash, then yes, you can just fire it with another flash. The issue though is if that flash is on your camera, that flash is going to put some light into the scene, and you may not want that. So it depends on how you want to work your setup. But for maximum control, I would recommend a set of radio triggers. And again, the Yumuro triggers are not terribly expensive. Yes, I know for you folks up in Canada, you get gouged because of conversion rates, which really sucks.
My world.
Yeah, but in US dollars, the the trigger set, a pair of 2 triggers, so one for the flash and one for the camera, which is all you need to get started, is like $30. So it's very, very reasonable. Okay, so Judy says it's the 430EX2 that activates with the pop-up flash. You can use that wirelessly with a Canon camera. You need to pop up that pop-up flash, go into the Canon's menu system, and go to the flash controls, and you need to turn on the wireless TTL function, and then you need to tell the camera that your flash on your camera is commander only, which means that it only sends signals and it doesn't flash during the actual photo. And then you can shoot wirelessly with that without having to buy a radio trigger. So that's what I would do. And if you need some help figuring that out, Judy, you can just shoot me an email or shoot Mark an email. Well, actually, shoot me. I used to shoot Canon. Mark, I don't think you're familiar with their menu systems.
No, not really.
So yeah, shoot me an email, Spyros@selfhelpphotographer.com, and let me know what camera you have, and I can direct you to some information on how to set that up.
Yeah, it's actually similar to the question that we got earlier. I was asked, how do I get my main trigger to synchronize with my other triggers? And in a case like that, again, without knowing the make and model, they're all different, so there is no real easy way to answer a question like that.
Right. The basics of this are your main trigger needs to be compatible with your other triggers, right? So I'm currently locked into the Pocket Wizard system. These particular triggers right here, the +3s, are $150 each, but I bought them because at the time they were the best and most reliable triggers that you could get. At the time I bought these, which was a good 6 years ago now, maybe 7 even, the Yongnuo triggers were not nearly as good as they are today. And the other triggers that I had been using, which were not Yongnuo, but it was a different brand, they were not working for me anymore either. So I splashed the money out for these because I wanted something I knew was going to work. But now I need all Pocket Wizard triggers in order to make my flashes go. So I have 6 of these, which again, that hurt when I bought all these. On the other hand, if you have all Yongnuo, then you just need to add another Yongnuo trigger or a flash that has a Yongnuo receiver by Yongnuo into your system. So the way to get them to work is to make sure they're all compatible with each other, which means if your main trigger is a Pocket Wizard, as an example, then you need to get more Pocket Wizards. Yeah. If your main trigger is Yongnuo, then you need to get more Yongnuo receivers so that trigger can trigger those receivers and light your lights up for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, what else we got for questions? I know we didn't even get to the questions from our notes, so let's go through those super fast.
We got a couple of them. One from Danny. I do event photography, and it's always indoors. When you're going to take a group shot with about 8 or 10 subjects, what would be the best way to light them? A softbox on camera right, or another on camera left, or one softbox camera right and one speed light on camera aiming at the ceiling? I'm struggling with this. I can fix it in post, but I want to get it right in camera.
Okay, let me look at this here.
Great.
Because I want to understand this a little bit. I heard you saying it, but I need to picture a softbox on camera right and another on camera left, or one softbox camera right and one speed light on camera aiming at the ceiling. I'm struggling with this, and I can fix it in post, but want to get it right. Okay, got it. All right. So honestly, if you want to fill that light in as best as possible, in my opinion, the best bet is to go with the 2 softboxes, one camera right and one camera left. If you have another flash, you could actually get even better light and more even light across the entirety of the group by going softbox camera right, softbox camera left, and speed light on the camera pointed up at the ceiling. Because what's going to happen with camera right and camera left softboxes is if you have a group of 8 to 10 people, right? You've got Lisa here, and then I'm standing behind Lisa like this, right? Camera right softbox, camera left, is going to hit Lisa, and some of that light's going to come over here, but she's going to cast a shadow on me, which means this is going to be dark here. Camera whatever side softbox is going to come over here, and it's going to hit me, and some of it's going to get over here too, but this is going to be dark. If you want that filled in, that on-camera flash, that's going to bounce some light up here, and some of that light is definitely going to get down here and light this up so it's not quite so dark and not quite so shadowed. So that would be like an ideal setup there if you can. But absent that, I would go camera soft boxes, camera right and camera left, because that's going to give you the best and most evenly distributed light across the group. If your flash is on camera, then half of the group is going to suffer because it doesn't have a soft box. It's going to be darker and it's going to be pain in the butt to deal with.
Yeah. I've done some large groups for the karate club, and that's basically what I did. Is I used umbrellas, but same sort of principle: umbrella left and umbrella right. And with a group, get your umbrellas up high, because then it'll help with the shadows from the other people.
Yep, that's exactly right. Thank you for pointing that out. I should have mentioned that. That basically helps do what the flash hitting the ceiling would do. If you get those lights up high, it's going to help, right? Because if I'm here, and again, the light's way up here, some of that light from the top is going to get down in here around the top of Lisa's head and make this not quite so dark.
Yeah, you don't only end up with the shadows on your shoulders, potentially.
Right. And if, the shoulder's not so bad. All right. What else we got for questions, Mark?
Okay. Question from Ken. If using long shutter speeds in manual mode, could you still use flash in rear curtain sync?
Yes, absolutely. Rear curtain sync, if you're not familiar, it means that instead of the flash going off at the beginning of the photo, which is what it normally does, it'll actually go off instead at the end of the photo, right before you're finished taking the photo, right before the shutter closes. And that's helpful for, holy crap, Emmanuel, thank you very much. He just did a super chat thing and paid $5.
Sweet.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow, I've never had anybody do that before. That was really cool of you, Emmanuel. So I wanted to acknowledge that.
YouTube's going to take awesome. $4.99 of it probably, but
actually, I think all of that goes to the creator.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but anyway, back to what we were saying. The reason you might want to do a rear curtain sync with the flash is to make sure that your subject looks the way you want. An example is when you're taking a photograph of a moving subject. Let's say I was walking across the scene like this, right? And when you use a long shutter speed, you're going to get like me moving through the shot. You're going to see that motion of me walking, right? And if you have a flash on the camera, if you use it at front curtain sync, which is the default, what's going to happen is and then the flash is going to go off. It's going to freeze me here. And then I'm going to walk. And as I'm walking, you can get all that motion. And the resulting photo is going to look like I'm walking backwards, because you'll see all this streakiness from here all the way back to the point where I was frozen by the flash. If you flip that around so that the flash fires right before the end of the photo, and what happens is you press the shutter button and the shutter opens, I walk, and then I get to this point here, and then the flash fires right before the picture ends, and then it looks like I'm walking, and then you see me here, so it looks like I'm walking front ways. So that's why you'd want to use that, and you absolutely can, as long as your camera and flash working together support second curtain sync.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. So I think a lot of it will depend on your flash and your camera.
Right.
Because I think with my young Nuos, I don't think I can do rear curtain with that setup.
I don't believe so. Right now, I don't have the capability to do rear curtain sync because, again, I don't have any flashes that can talk to my camera. My flashes are all dumb flashes, which is to say that the only communication between the flash and the camera is the signal from the camera telling the flash to fire.
Yeah, I suspect with doing the rear curtain sync, it's probably you can probably only do that in TTL maybe. I'm not sure. I've never played with it. So.
Yeah. Basically, you need advanced communication from your flash and your camera, which is why, when TC, I think it was earlier, said, buying a TTL flash is a bad idea. It's not. It's actually, it can be useful to have a TTL flash. You might not use the TTL capability where the flash sets the power for you, but that advanced communication can allow you to do things like the second curtain sync. The other thing it can allow you to do is what Victor asked about, which is high-speed sync. And I don't have the ability to do a demo because my flash and my camera that I could do high-speed sync on is in the house. I should have brought it out here, but I can explain it and I can do the demo next week because we might as well do this again next week. You think, Mark?
Yeah, it seems like everybody likes it, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, I mean, like this
So
one's
we could
fast.
almost do a weekend show on it.
Yeah, we probably could. So anyway, when we were talking about the sync speed earlier, remember I mentioned how the one shutter comes up and then the second one comes up behind it, and because of that, you have to stay underneath your camera's sync speed. High-speed sync allows you to actually shoot above your camera sync speed, and it works by it works because what the flash does is instead of shooting one flash burst, just once for the shot, it pulses. So every time it pulses, it's moving with the shutter essentially. So every pulse goes through that little slit between the curtains and makes sure that all of the flash hits all of the shot from top to bottom, and you don't get any photos of your shutter curtain in your camera. Let's see. RJ says you can do it manually with a flash in a dark room, long exposure, and pop the flash manually. That's a good point. Yeah, that's very, very true. That's literally just using something like a 2-second shutter speed as an example, where I'm walking and then somebody's holding the transmitter and I get to this point and that person hits the button, which causes the flash to fire, and then the camera finishes taking the picture. That's manual second curtain sync, or rear curtain sync as it's called.
But it works.
But it works, yeah, and I've done it. Okay. Oh, Christopher's here. That's awesome. So what else we got for questions here? I can go another 5 minutes, and then we'll have to roll the rest of these questions over to next week.
Okay. So there was one question that was asked, but it wasn't flash related. Did you want to quickly touch on it?
Which one? Go ahead. Yeah.
So it's not flash related, but basically, can you tell me which mode is better to do blur? I have a Canon 100D with an 18-55 lens.
Blur. Like.
So I'm assuming they mean blur out the background. I'm assuming.
Yeah, if you want background blur, the mode isn't as important. Like the easiest way to get black background blur is to go. There's a video I've got on my YouTube channel. It's called 3 Steps to Shallow Depth. Do a search for that video on my YouTube channel, and it will take you exactly step by step through how to get that blurred out shallow depth of field background that you're looking for. It'll tell you the mode, exactly what settings to use, and how to get the best results with your camera and lens. All right, what else we got for questions here?
I got another one here. I think we touched on it already, and basically it's from Bill saying he was shooting indoors with a flash and got some good pictures last night. But is there a set rule, like the triangle rule, for keeping stuff like that in mind?
That's kind of, yeah, we did touch on that, but I did want to go. Yeah, Candy, the money does go to me for the super chat, which is a pretty cool thing that YouTube added. It's a way for people who watch the live streams and participate to support the creators of the YouTubers that are doing it. So again, I do want to say thank you very much to Emmanuel for doing that. That was really very, very kind of you, and I appreciate that. But back to the question, what was the question again? I totally forgot.
So the triangle rule.
The triangle rule, got it. Yep. Okay, so honestly, there is and there isn't. And I say that because if you know your flash settings and your camera settings, you can reliably replicate results by using those settings, right? So as an example, like we were talking about earlier, if you know your equipment, I know if I'm going to take a headshot like we were doing earlier, and I'm going to use my umbrella, and I want it to be nice, soft, diffused light with good light over here and a bit of shadow over here, I'm going to set my flash up. I'm going to put an umbrella on here. I'm going to put it around here for position, and I'm going to set my power on the flash to 1/16 of a power. on my camera, I'm going to use the exact settings that I have on my camera, 1/250th of a second, f7.1, and ISO 200. And I know that because I know my equipment. And I could write all of that down and like give it to you, right? And then that's something that you could use. But unfortunately with Flash, there's no like the procedure to follow. Okay, let me back it up. And we're going to go over this next week. This will be the principal thing that we start with next week, which is my method. It's a step-by-step method. It's not exactly like the ISO aperture shutter speed method, but it is a method. It is an exact process that you can use so that every time you're using Flash, you get exactly the results you want to get out of it. And the process, I'll explain it in brief, and then we'll go into it in depth next week. The process is, number one, light settings. And that's your initial ISO aperture and shutter speed to underexpose your ambient light, or expose it wherever you want if you want to include it, because sometimes you do want to include the ambient. And then number two, you got to visualize the shot you want with your subject. And then you got to know, okay, what do I need to do with light number one? And you set up light number one, test shot until you get the look you want out of that light. And once you got that, then you move on to the next light if you're using multiple lights, and you do that until the shot looks exactly the way you want it to look. That's the process described. And like I said, we'll go through it next week. In fact, holy crap, Candy and Moonlight Productions, you guys are awesome. Thank you. Holy crap.
Yeah, definitely thank you.
Yeah, like double trip.
It shows we're appreciated.
Yeah, very, very much appreciated. Thank you so much, you guys. You guys are awesome. We'll do that next week, step by step. And what I'd like to do is I want all of you to pick some photos that you see online that you like and start sending me pictures. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab one of those photos, and step by step, I'm going to go through the process of figuring out how to make a photo look exactly like the photo you guys pick out to send me. And so when I say pick me a photo, make sure it's something that I can do in studio so I can show it to you guys. So some sort of portrait type of lighting that allows, that's in studio that I can replicate to show you guys the process. Hey, Christopher, I appreciate that. That's Canadian too, Moonlight says. Thank you very much. The super chat, it's not bidding, but it's essentially, it's supporting me and Mark. Yeah, it's a donation by doing this. So for us doing this. So, I mean, again, thank you guys for those of you who are doing it. It's absolutely not required, but Mark and I definitely appreciate the heck out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So there was, I think, one more question that we didn't quite get, which was Hiram's question, which was, is manual mode the best way to control your flash over? Oh yeah, we did talk about that.
Yeah. He did have another question
okay.
too. Where did it go? I lost it.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me find it here. It moved on me. I had to highlight it.
Bill Miller says, is Canadian money colder?
Okay, here you go. So Hiram asked, do you recommend two different flash, one older? And then, so basically, I think he's asking whether or not you can mix and match different age and brands of flashes. And
that's a good question.
The short answer is yes, as long as you have a trigger that will talk to them. Absolutely.
Yes, and that's something we should highlight, is how does the trigger talk to the camera? Thomas Giuliano, he says NP PayPal. I'm not sure. I take PayPal if that's what you're asking, but this super chat thing I think goes directly through YouTube, and then comes to me via YouTube. But to the point of the trigger talking to the flash, right? This trigger has to be able to communicate with the flash. And you guys saw me whinging this thing around here. This is called a sync cord. And this is how the trigger talks to the flash. This port right here, this is called the PC sync port. And this end of the cord goes into this plug here. I think it's kind of a terrible plug design, but it's an old one. and then the trigger has a plug, and you plug that in there. That allows the trigger to talk to the flash. Not every flash has a sync port on it. As an example, I can't remember who has it, but the Canon 430EX2 does not have a sync port,
Yeah,
which
I think
means you can't use Pocket Wizards.
The entry-level cameras, I don't think, have the sync port on them.
Right. So like this flash does. Now, if you have the 430EX and you want to get radio triggers, this is not the end of the world, because the Yongnuo triggers, so that they have a hot shoe on top, which means like you actually, the trigger would look like this, and then right here there's a hot shoe, and what you do is you slide the flash on top of the trigger, and that allows the flash to talk to the trigger to talk to the flash and tell it to fire. So like if your camera, I'm getting all tongue-tied now. If your flash does not have a port, then you need to make sure you get a radio trigger that has a hot shoe on it so you can slide the flash onto the trigger. And you need to make sure that radio trigger is compatible with all the other radio triggers you're using. So again, if it's Yongnuo, then make sure all of your triggers are Yongnuo. I'm using Pocket Wizard, so if I was going to use another flash, I could get the newest version of the Pocket Wizard, the +4 version, which was redesigned, and it has a hot shoe on the top of it, so I could do the same thing with the newer Pocket Wizards. Whew, okay. Sandy says, have to go, see you next week. Thanks for this lesson. I enjoyed it, learned some stuff. That's fantastic. Emmanuel, I definitely do photo reviews and critiques. It's something that we do on the Photo Blabs, although we didn't do one tonight because we're here in the studio. And then I also do them on the channel. If you want to submit a photo, just go to selfhelpphotographer.com/photoblab, and there's a form there on the page where you can submit your photo for critique.
Yeah, well, what do you guys think of this format, doing stuff like this too?
Yeah, before we wrap this up and go, I think people really like this, but yeah, definitely want to know, like, do you guys want us to do this again next week? I'm totally up for it if you guys are. This was super fun, and I really enjoyed it. It went by like so fast, I can't even believe it. Like the Photo Blabs go fast. This felt like it went twice as fast as the Photo Blab normally does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we gotta wait for the chat delay to run through so everybody can hear what we just said. Jim Tinker says, thanks for a great show. Will do. Awesome. Awesome. We're going to see some photos coming from Emmanuel. Oh, gosh, I got to hurry because I got to clean up my kitchen. It is a total disaster. Okay, they're coming in. Definitely people are liking this stuff.
Well, that's good.
All right, so we will do this again next week. If we didn't get to your question, I do want to say apologies if we missed it in the chat. Please let us know, and we will make sure to include it for next week. We always want to try to answer all your guys' questions. Once again, thank you so much to everybody who did the super chat, Emmanuel, Candy, and Moonlight Productions. That really very generous, and we really appreciate that. Any and all support is very appreciated, and that's really fantastic if we can do that. Everybody's saying they love this format, very informative, definitely do more. So we'll do this, and maybe this will be the new style of Photo Blab. Mark,
well, you did want to move it out to the studio anyway, so.
Yeah, I did, because yeah, it's I mean, doing it inside is not so bad, but this computer can handle everything much easier. So, all right, thank you so much, everybody. Very happy to have you all with us tonight. Mark and I always appreciate it. Mark, anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. It was a great show. Glad to have everybody here, and glad you like this format. And it was definitely fun doing it like this, actually demonstrating something on the fly. So it was great. Yeah, absolutely. We'll do this again next week. We just had another super chat come in from Thomas Giuliano. So again, thank you. Yep, thank you very much.
You guys are amazing. Like, honestly, I can't express enough how much I appreciate your support. It means a lot. You know, Mark and I love doing this. I love making the videos that I make. And it means a lot that you guys appreciate that and want to show your support for that. So thank you very much. Yeah, my mannequin definitely doesn't talk all that much. No, that's because the mic's off. That's why. Yeah, the mic's off. I need to turn her mic on. We couldn't really shut her up. We just couldn't hear her. Yeah, right. All right. So on that note, last thank you to everybody. Appreciate all of you. All of you. Thank you so much. We will see you next week right back here in the studio for more Photo Blab.
Yep. Night, everybody.
Good night. All right. I got to find all my stop buttons. All right. Good night, everybody.